All right, it's we're going to talk a little football now with Rob Staton, SeahawksDraftBlog.com, brought to you by Superior Linen Service, family owner operated since 1926, committed to delivering the highest quality products, services to the greater Puget Sound area. Get your free quote today, suplinen.com. Give them a call, 253-383-2636. Check out all of Rob's insights, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. For video content, check out his YouTube channel, Rob Staton Football. Follow him on Twitter at Rob Staton. All right, sir. How are you? You're getting compliments on the chat about that hat. Looks good.
Yeah, do you know, I actually did manage to fit in a Supersonics game before they left.
Did you?
So the first sporting event I ever went to in Seattle was a Mariners game, and they lost 10-0 to the Blue Jays.
Sounds about right.
The second time I went to Seattle, we went to watch the Supersonics play, and they lost to the San Antonio Spurs. And it cost me $10 to get in, which was £5 which is, I couldn't believe it. It didn't matter how entertaining it was to be able to go and watch the NBA for £5, $10 was unbelievable. And then the next day was Monday Night Football, Seahawks Packers. I had no real affinity to the Seahawks, but after that night, I was hooked, and I have not missed a game since. And we're coming up to 20 years now. So there we go.
What year was that again?
It was 2006.
2006. So 2 years, right? 2 years before they ended up leaving. All right. Now we're begging them for them to come back. Well, that's good. That's good. That's a hell of a weekend, by the way.
Yeah, look, I always when I try and get out
sports weekend.
Whenever I tend to go over to the States, it has to be with the idea of sport. So whenever we've been, like when I've been with my wife and my kids, there's always been like an event that I have to go to. So we were even looking at going to New York for the Jets game this year. We're not going to do that now. But the reason we were going to do it, we're not going because the Seahawks are playing the way they are. But I think the Rangers were playing and stuff like that. So it's good to combine these things, and just I live for live sport. So any chance I get to go to live sport, I take it.
All right, let's see the news that just came down about an hour ago. Abe Lucas is back. I mean, obviously, good news. It helps out this offensive line. I don't know what. I'm going to temper my expectations a little bit just because he hasn't played so long. What about you, Rob?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm got no expectations for Abe Lucas in this game in particular because Nick Bosa is going to be playing against him. What a baptism of fire that's going to be. I think I've got a little bit of a concern. It seems to me that they rushed Uchenna and Nwosu back, and he got injured again, and he's been out ever since. I think it's easy to say with hindsight now that they probably rushed George Fant back because he's gone onto IR. Now, they have taken things very slowly with Abe Lucas, but part of me does wonder, Puck, if Fant was healthy, for example, would Abe Lucas be playing in this game? Probably not. If Jarrell had played a little bit better in previous weeks, would he be playing? Probably not. I'm worried that this is a little bit of desperation on the Seahawks' behalf, that they're just chucking Abe Lucas out there now. I really hope that he is in a position to handle that his knee is ready to play these games, because it's absolutely critical. Like, this season, to me, doesn't really matter for Abe Lucas. If you could say to me, you could have Abe Lucas completely healthy and have a great chance to play 17 games next season, but he doesn't play any games this year, I will take that. I think the need to win this weekend is not as important for Abe Lucas as making sure he's fully healthy.
God, I don't know. I feel like they've really taken almost been real cautious with him in a way.
I think they have been very cautious
out for a long time.
He has, but what is the protocol for coming back when you've been out for this long? Like, it feels like a few weeks ago they were barely talking about the guy.
Yeah,
like they weren't even talking about him coming back, and now all of a sudden it's gone, oh yeah, he's ready now. I don't know. Maybe that's just fear on my behalf, and maybe it is the Nwosu and the Fant stuff that is leading me that way. I just really hope that he's ready. I really hope, because I don't want in 2 weeks, Puck, him to be going back on IR and wondering if this was worth it. I fingers crossed that's not going to happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're agreement on that one. Yeah, if it's, you don't want like a George Fant situation again. Did George Fant last a series? I can't even remember.
It felt like about a few plays, yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, maybe they were taking this cautiously optimistic approach with him to make sure that surgically repaired knee was ready. I think it's interesting because I remember even going back to draft night talking to Garafolo, and he's like, no, and he was talking to his agent and saying that, no, he'll be ready for training camp, should be ready for the season. And then, just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. So maybe they were like, maybe he had a setback. We'll never know. We'll never know the true story because they'll never going to reveal it. Abe certainly is not a talkative guy. He's not going to go out and reveal it at all. But yeah, you want his, not only this year, but his long-term availability, to be there for Seattle. Because remember, I think it was Carroll even himself brought it up last year. Was he not the first one to bring up, it could be chronic?
He was. I think they've pushed back on that a little bit since and tried to maybe, whether it's true or not, suggest that Carroll misspoke there. But I wonder if it's a mental thing with him. Like if there was a timeline that maybe had him coming back for training camp and playing, maybe he personally is in this position where if he doesn't feel entirely comfortable with it, he's been saying to the team, it doesn't feel comfortable. And that's completely understandable when you've had a serious injury and you've had surgery and stuff like that. I really hope he comes back because he is one of the players that I've enjoyed scouting the most over the last 5 or 6 years. I gave him a fringe first round grade on my horizontal board and talked him up as much as anybody going into that draft. I was shocked that he lasted to round 3. I think it's pretty obvious why he lasted to round 3 now, but to sort of see him play possibly because of the injury concerns, but he looked in his first year like that's your answer. Like that's your right tackle for the next however many years. And also the one thing that he brings that Charles Cross doesn't bring is that he is somebody whose grit, violence, aggression is everything you need in an offensive lineman. And he could have been the voice. He could have been the leader up front. He could be one of the leaders of this team, but he's got to be on the field to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's good to have him back, and we'll see just what, maybe the offensive line can start, having, a little bit more stability to it. I mean, it's not going to solve what you have in the interior, right? It's not going to solve your center issue, and it's certainly not going to solve your two guards. But maybe now hopefully, fingers crossed, having the anchors on the outside will help you. They're still going to have, to spend this rest of the season, Rob, and then the offseason, still going to look at of trying to upgrade, 3/5 of their offensive line.
Yeah, it's a huge job. I mean, I have got a theory, Puck. Do you want to hear it?
Of course.
Okay. So you have Mike Garafolo on every week. And he is, when he speaks about the Seahawks, you have to listen. Because I think he's one of 2 reporters who are really, really in tune with the Seahawks. Like when they speak, they're speaking from great sources. They speak with an authority about the Seahawks. So when I was listening to your conversation with him in the airport last week, and you were asking him about DK Metcalf and the offensive line and Geno Smith, I kind of just started to piece things together in my head as to what they're going to do next offseason. And this is just my prediction based on what Mike said. I'm kind of putting 2 and 2 together and getting 5. Here's what I think they're going to do. I think they're going to pretty much carry on with their plan for the offensive line, which will be to draft somebody, possibly in the first round, to sort of look for value there. I think it will be a cheapish, probably veteran free agent who comes in as well. And I think that's what their plan will be. I think they'll carry on with that because Mike said, look, they'll just go and draft somebody. They'll be able to fix the line. They said it's fine. He spoke about DK Metcalf's contract being like the big talking point of next offseason. Again, reading the tea leaves of what Mike was saying, I get the sense that he believes that John Schneider thinks DK is a unique player, that there are not many people like DK Metcalf, and that's absolutely true. And therefore, why would you let a player like that go? And that they will pay him. It will make it financially difficult, but they will pay him and keep him because they will feel like they need to keep him as a potential star or a star. And then the other thing was Geno Smith. And you talked about the offensive lineman, Mike, and he immediately turned it on to, but what about the quarterback? He's not going to win you a Super Bowl, is he? So I was reading into that as to thinking, they ain't paying Geno Smith $40 million. Like, I think the big talking point next offseason is going to be one of those 2 players is not going to be on the roster, whether that's DK or Geno Smith, that you can't make the cap work. And Curtis Allen did a fantastic piece on the cap explaining some of the difficulties they've got, which is on SeahawksDraftBlog.com now. Go and check it out. I don't think one of those players is going to be with Seattle, at least if Geno is with Seattle, he will not be on a $40 million a year contract. So I think they may well go cheaper at quarterback, whatever that means, possibly with a draft, possibly with a cheaper veteran, re-sign DK, and then carry on with their plan for the offensive line that hasn't worked, but maybe they just will think the value is not there in the veteran market, so turn to the draft.
Yeah, it's a long, lengthy read, but it's a good, informative one there from Curtis Allen up at SeahawksDraftBlog.com, talking about the comprehensive look at the state of the 25 Seahawks salary cap. Yeah, he made a good point. He has been, Mike over the years been adamant, not over the years, but over the course of a year, I guess, adamant about always, hey, close your eyes, and can you see Geno at the rafters at the Super Bowl, with the at the media day, and every time I'm like, no, I just think that you can't tie up so much money in two particular players without fixing the offensive line. He drafted DK. He understands what the special talent that DK is, but for Geno, listen, I don't think there's going to be much of a market for him anyways. You've talked about that before. Who are they going to be competing with him? And he's not even a free agent anyways, but they're certainly not going to let him, if they bring him back, they're not going to let him play on that cap. They're not going to play him on $38 million. So, but here's the deal, Rob, if let's say they decide in the offseason to move on. And I think DK is a perfectly good quarterback if you have the entire team around you set up. Like if they had a first-class offensive line, their defense was set, they didn't have holes at linebacker and all this, I'd be like, yeah, I think, you know what? All things considered, he'd go out and win you one. He could be on that team. But they aren't close, I don't think. They got too many holes on this football team. But where do you then turn your attention? I mean, is it Sam Howell? Is it another free agent? Is it a trade? Is it someone in the draft?
Well, I think that is the interesting question. I think everything you've just said is correct about Geno Smith, and I think no one is, neither you or I think, is suggesting here that Geno Smith is the problem. No, anyone who's watched the games knows that Geno Smith is not the problem, and it is the offensive line. But it's about the timeline, isn't it? It's about, if you need to rebuild aspects of this team, for example, the offensive line, you need money to do that. You need stock to do that. And how are you going to find it? And if you need to rebuild the offensive line in order to become the kind of team you want to be, when is that going to formulate? Is it in 2 years' time when Geno Smith's 37? And do you want to commit tens of millions of dollars a year, most of it guaranteed, to a quarterback who is, approaching 40 by that point? I don't think so. So I think they will go cheaper. I think the other point to make, Puck, is, this is the GM. Let's not forget that, I know it's a long time ago now, wanted to move on from Matt Hasselbeck with Charlie Whitehurst. He traded for Charlie Whitehurst. He wanted to move on from Matt Flynn for Russell Wilson, and he signed Matt Flynn as well, but he did that. He wanted to move on from Russell Wilson to Drew Lock and was prepared to do that. I think he wanted Drew Lock back this year to replace Geno Smith because he taught Drew Lock up so much and didn't barely mention Geno's name during those press conferences. So I think he is somebody who is prepared to move on, however unpopular that may be. As to who it could be, there will be quarterbacks available this offseason who are in that same sort of Sam Darnold, Geno Smith boat of needing to be a reclamation project. So I think there's some options there. I also think they will look at the draft. And there's one quarterback in particular that I keep coming back to that I think John Schneider will be interested in. And, people are going to be sick of me saying this, but it is the Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers. I think there is a no smoke without fire situation going on here. And I think that if he is available a little bit later on, as I think he will be now, late first, second round, I would not be surprised if the Seahawks end up drafting him.
I mean, and who knows where the season goes. I think currently they're at, 13, I believe? I think it's 13th is with their draft. I think right now.
I think the 15th at the minute, but with every loss, they're 15th at the moment. But there are so many bad teams in the NFL. You have 5 teams with 2 wins, and then you have another 5 or 6 with 3 wins. So there are so many bad teams but if they keep losing, they're going to be in the top 10 soon.
Yeah. And and then it gets to the point where I brought up this week. I mean, and I know the organization wouldn't think this way. I talked about it yesterday with Danny Kelly from the Ringer. But if they lose their next 2 games here, I would just say, honestly, the best thing, even though they don't think like this, and I get it, but the best thing would be for them then to just lose the rest of their games, just to improve your draft stock. Now, again, maybe the counter to that is it's not a good draft anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And I thought Danny brought up a good point. He's like, yeah, even if they do lose the next 2 games, you do want like the culture to work, and you do want the belief that they have in their system. You want to see it get better, and I get that, and that's the smart intellectual way to look at it rather than the idiotic way that I look at it. But for an organization that is never able to get up in the top 10 or even flirt with a top 5 forever, and I guess that my argument would work more, Rob, and better if this was a class of great quarterbacks. It's not. They could be good, but it's just people aren't raving about it. But I mean, these next 2 weeks, I mean, if they drop them, they go to 4-7. I mean, their playoff hopes are done. They're not going to come back from that. Where would you sit with that? Kind of what you would want them to see them do? Kind of like how I feel a little bit, or kind of more where Danny Kelly's at?
Probably somewhere in between. I think, almost ideally, as long as you're seeing some progress, even if they're losing, it doesn't really matter. So if they're losing close games but playing tough, physical, if the defense starts to work itself out, if you can see some green shoots there, even if you are losing games but the defense is playing really well, then great. Like then you can have the best of both worlds. I don't think, wins against, let's say the Bears implode from here and you beat them, or the Jets continue to be a shambles and you beat them. Who cares if you win those games? You're not learning anything from those games. Really, it's about the product on the field. Like, whether they win or lose, are they progressing towards something? I think is the most important thing. And if they lose those games and can still show some progress, then that might be the best of both. What I would say about this draft is, like you mentioned it there, the biggest problem is that this is not a good. It's a very thin draft. If you're picking in the top 10, like the players that people are going to end up coveting when it gets to sort of the new year are going to be 2 hybrid linebackers in Abdul Carter and Jalen Walker, another defensive tackle that took one in the first round last year, Mason Graham, another quarterback in Will Johnson. It's players like that. I haven't got a single left tackle graded with a firm first round grade. It's a really sort of poor offensive tackle draft. Interior line, I think all of the tackles that are the big names in college, a lot of them are going to have to kick inside, and because they just don't have the arm length. Like Will Campbell at LSU, who's got 32-inch arms. You can't play left tackle in the NFL with 32-inch arms unless you're something special, and he isn't. So he's going to have to move inside, and people like that will have to move inside. That's not the worst thing in the world for the Seahawks. But then how early do you want to take one? You take a guy who's having to move from left tackle to left guard at 12 overall or something? Like that's really hard to justify that. So, you could even argue that there's going to be a no man's land in this draft from about pick 7 to about pick 15, where you have got no value. And then if it gets to that point, you might as well pick in the top 7 and get at least one of the players who have a first round grade on your board. The problem is it couldn't be someone like Colston Loveland, who's a bloody tight end. Like that, there just isn't or Ashton Genty,
He's the guy out of Michigan, right?
Yeah, but there's people like Ashton Genty and Colson, they're going to have first round grades. But you're taking another running back or another tight end?
You can't do that.
You can't do it. So, but this is the thing. This is this draft. It's such a weird draft where it's thin everywhere. Like every position is thin except running back, which is loaded, and teams don't take those players early. And then with the quarterbacks, like you say, we may only see one quarterback drafted in the first round, and that's Shador. Yeah. Like I don't think he's going to go as early as people think. Like they're just, when you watch these quarterbacks, they are typically, like, draft media is having an all-timer this year. The amount of nonsense that is coming out of draft media is incredible. Like the stuff that they're saying about some of these players, they're just overrating them so much. They've got it wrong consistently during this draft cycle. It's pretty hard to listen to some of the stuff they're saying, and they're saying there's going to be like 3-4 first-round quarterbacks. They're not good enough.
Let me throw a name out just from a quarterback sense. Now, I'm doing a lot of this just for entertainment value, but I am curious where you sit with him. I know someone I trust a lot who loves this guy, and he played quarterback, and it's our guy Hugh Millen. Hugh Millen loves Daniel Jones, loves him.
Okay.
Adam Schefter talked this morning about how he wouldn't be surprised if Daniel Jones has played his last snap for the Giants, and that they'll move on and just part ways with Daniel Jones. Would you? I don't know. Would you kick the tires on someone like Daniel Jones, or do you think he's completely lost?
I don't think he's completely lost. I mean, he played ever so well against Seattle in Seattle, didn't he? I don't think he's completely lost. I think the problem with him, and I would never ever put my quarterback analysis credentials up against the mighty Hugh Millen. And he may disagree with this, and if he does, then I cede to Hugh on this. I just wonder about his deep throwing ability. Can he? Like when you think of Ryan Grubb, you think of attacking every blade of grass, and I think John Schneider wants that as well. I'm not sure whether Daniel Jones can do that. Like his deep throws have not been good for a long time, but he is mobile. He is athletic, and look, if they are going to go cheaper at quarterback, if they're going to bring somebody in as a reclamation project, I'm afraid to say that's the kind of person that you are looking at. And, I was one of the people when they traded Russell Wilson who thought, Geno Smith? I don't really want to watch 16 games, 17 games of Geno Smith. And he played a lot better than expected. And there may be a lot of Minnesota fans who are like, oh my word, we're stuck with Sam Darnold now. The first round pick, JJ McCarthy got injured, and they'll have enjoyed aspects of that. So I'd be loath to write Daniel Jones off. I think he has got there is something about him that is interesting. That's why he went in the top 10. But I'm not sure he's a fit.
Yeah, we discuss this stuff all the time. I'm not sure if he's a fit or not. I just, I don't know if we have a complete evaluation. I mean, he's played in the league for 6 years. So, I mean, we certainly have a lot of information on him, certainly more than other quarterbacks. And he started a bunch of games. I mean, he started 69 games. And you look at his stats overall and, where he's at, he hasn't lit the world on fire, what he's been able to do as a quarterback, but sometimes it does come down to fit. We talk about fit all the time with quarterbacks, where you're drafted, what organization do you go to? Who's the head coach at the time? Who's the GM? Who's the offensive coordinator? All of that. Like you're seeing this play out right now, in Chicago with Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams was, he's a fabulous, unbelievable talent when you watched him play at USC. And then the Bears get the first round pick or the first overall pick, and you're like, okay, but is he going to the right system? Is he going to go to the right head coach? Is that head coach going to have the right offensive coordinator? Well, obviously they didn't, because they fired their offensive coordinator. And then their head coach is going to be fired at the end of the season. So now then he's going to go on to another head coach. He's going to go on to another offensive system. And you got to get it right, because if you don't get it right, you do have to spend a number of years, Rob, investing in this first-round talent to make sure that they are the right guy. And you have to get it correct. Same thing with Carolina. They moved on already from the coach who was first assigned to Bryce Young. Now on to another coach. Who knows if Dave Canales is the right guy for Bryce Young? But it's the hardest thing in sport is to find a quarterback. There's nothing harder.
Can I give you another example? Like what's happening with Anthony Richardson right now? Like the Colts drafted him, and when you did a lot of work on Anthony Richardson, and I still believe there's a chance that if it had been there at 5, the Seahawks would have taken him. And what Anthony Richardson needed was possibly a year red shirt. Yeah, bringing him along slowly. Appreciate that he's going to take time. It's probably going to take 2 years of starting like it did for Josh Allen to get to where he needs to be. You're going to have to work through some growing pains. In the meantime, sort of accentuate what he's good at and limit what he can't do to make him the best possible player and protect him and keep him healthy. That's what you had to do. The Colts did none of that. He got injured. He's been banged up again this year. They're not protecting him. They haven't given him any weapons. They then bench him. They bring Joe Flacco in. Now they're bringing Anthony Richardson back. Like his career, this is not how you handle somebody like a young quarterback. This is not how you make the smooth transition. Then you look at what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. They had everything set up with Alex Smith in place. They bring him in. They redshirt him for a year. They bring him in when the time is right. Now, I think everything that everyone said about Mahomes when he was a rookie was that he could easily have started as a rookie. But they resisted that temptation and gave him a whole redshirt year. And this is the problem for the Seahawks, is that they've had essentially 3 years with Geno Smith as the starter. and they haven't drafted anybody. Now, they haven't missed on anybody. I think it'd be very harsh to sort of say, well, they should have taken a quarterback in the last 2 drafts. Who have they could have taken that's gone on to have success? Nobody. So I let them off the hook a little bit for that. But now they're in this situation where they've got to make a decision on Geno's contract. They probably want to get cheaper at quarterback. If they like somebody like Quinn Ewers, what do you do? Because if it's him versus Sam Howell in camp, there's always a chance that Sam Howell ain't winning that job and that you don't make yourself disciplined enough to go, we're going to fight through potential losses for the long-term goal of making this quarterback a success. And then it can all fail. And we've seen, look, you only have to watch the Georgia-Texas game a few weeks ago to see what happens to Quinn Ewers when he has bad pass protection. It was a massacre. So that's my concern. But I do think there's a possibility that they will go down that road. John Schneider was a huge admirer of Aaron Rodgers. He's on the record of saying that, when he was in Green Bay, he was a Rodgers guy. Scott McCloughan was an Alex Smith guy. Quinn Ewers compares himself to Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers and Ewers have almost identical size, frame. Throwing motion is almost identical. They have the same natural talent. Ewers has not maximized that, but his college stats are almost the same. And if he is going to fall, like a few weeks ago, he was a top 10 pick. He's been injured again. He's come back. He's been inconsistent. There are some health concerns because he can't stay on the field. If he drops to the late first, like Rodgers, or even to the second round, I think John Schneider's going to look at this and go, this is history repeating. I'm going to go and take a chance on this guy, and we're going to start drafting some quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's when you somewhat luck into the third round pick there of Russell Wilson. You're like, oh, that's great, and he turns out to be this amazing quarterback for you. Tom Brady in the was Brady in the 6th or 7th round. It's just I mean it's so hard. It's just so hard to find that guy and then do they go to the right spot with the right coaching? And all of that. I mean, you can just, when you don't get that position right, it can just absolutely crush your franchise. And then you search over and over and over again for finding that guy. I mean, look at Detroit. Detroit just bumbling around forever. And I mean, I know they had Matt Stafford, at some point, and then they were able to, they bumbled again and they found Jared Goff. But these organizations that continue to find themselves in the mud, it's because they just can't find that quarterback. You brought up the situation with Indianapolis. I mean, look at where they've been since Manning left. You just continue to try and search and find that guy. What did you make of the decision? I mean, listen, there's probably some other off seasons that have been worse, but I mean, I don't know. This ranks right up there as one of the worst off seasons for John Schneider. I mean, your 2 linebackers that you went out in the off season to go get, you identified as the replacements for Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks are gone, and Dodson now is with Brooks in Miami. What did you make of the latest move by releasing Tyrel Dodson?
Well, they signed Trey Ankrum, and then he's cut. They signed Nick Harris. They gave him away. They signed Jerome Baker, and they gave him away. They signed Tyrel Dodson. They've cut him. Their offensive line is a shambles. That's awful. John Schneider has had a terrible offseason. And Christian Haynes, you can throw him into the mix as well. Christian Haynes is a 3rd-round pick. Can he even play in the NFL? I don't think at this point, if he's not even if he's a healthy scratch, how can you have any real confidence in the guy? Like, short of just hope that somehow in the next year he can transform himself physically to be able to play, then there's a lot of worry right now that Christian Haynes is already just never going to work out. So it's a really poor offseason when he needed a good offseason. Like, this was his first. This was his first. He was opening gambit, the post Pete Carroll era, and he has hired a coach who has not had a great start, who is staring down the barrel of being 1-6 if they lose this weekend after an easy 3-0 start. His off-season's not been good. Like, he's not had an impactful draft, like not writing Byron Murphy off or anything like that. I like Byron Murphy. But look at the Rams draft. They're getting impact everywhere. Like, they've even got a center that they drafted, who I really liked, on day 3. And they took him out the lineup against Miami, and they struggled without him. It
was hard to watch Verse, especially in the last game. I mean, he's just all over the place, making plays left and right.
Yep. And, it's not a surprise that, by the way, because on the horizontal board that I had, I had Byron Murphy in the second tier, and I had Jared Verse in the top tier. He just had that alpha male sort of style to him, and obviously, I think anytime you can get hold of a great interior defensive lineman, it's seriously worth considering. And I still think that Byron Murphy can have a great career in Seattle, but it's hard to watch. And that's the thing, like, not a great draft. Question marks about the coaching hire already because they're on a horrible run, they're not playing very well, and the signings have been dreadful. And now he has piled the pressure on himself to the point that the next offseason, they ain't going to be able to just come out, whatever happens the rest of the way, Puck. They're not going to be able to come out and act all confident and cocky and, we're going to have a draft and look at, we're the Seahawks and all this and we're a premier organization. Now, actually, you're in prove-it mode now. Like, you've got to go out there. Like, he and Mike McDonald will be under, I think, an increasing amount of pressure. And some fans will never put whoever they could have a dog wearing a Seahawks hat, and they would sort of back that dog to lead the team. Like, but for the people like ourselves are going to keep talking about this. You've got a big offseason coming up. Fix the offensive line. Come up with some answers. Like, find some futures at quarterback. Like, get your offensive line sorted. Sort this defense out. Like, have a good draft that has impact players, not just a draft that you go through looking at why are the Rams doing this better than we are every year. Like, there's a lot of things that need to happen this offseason. And, whether you want to call John on the hot seat as a consequence, I don't know. Use whatever language you want. But I think there's an increasing amount of pressure on him. He's got to get this right next offseason.
Yeah, no, you're right. This offseason is the biggest since he's been here. I mean, I thought this was going to be a massive last offseason because I agree with you. This was it. Everything was on his shoulders now. This is what he wanted. This is what he got, right? This is no longer Pete Carroll sitting in his corner, I'm holding his hand, being there. It was all on him. And, there's a lot, and it changes people. Some guys, they can't handle it all being on them. And I think there's still some time to tell whether he can handle that or not. But this offseason will be gigantic for him.
And do you know what will increase pressure? Every single win the Pittsburgh Steelers have between now and the end of the season. Because they're suddenly becoming a romantic team within the NFL. And the quarterback is Russell Wilson. And they're playing the brand of football that we all assume the Seahawks want to play.
They look just like the Seahawks. So
if they have a great run, Puck, and if Russ is having the at the time of his life like he looks like he's having right now, it's going to cause some extra pressure. I'm telling you now.
Bring him home. Bring him home.
I think he'd be quite happy in Pittsburgh if they carry on playing like this.
Yeah, for sure. All right, there he is, Rob Staton, Seahawks draftblog.com. He joins us every single Wednesday, brought to you by Superior Linen Service, family owner operated since 1926. Superior Linen Service, committed to delivering the highest quality of products and services in the greater Puget Sound area. Get your free quote today at suplinen.com. Give him a call, 253-383-2636. Check out Rob's work, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Tell him what's up there right now, Rob.
Check out Curtis Allen's great piece on the cap. We've got some other things happening as well this week, so make sure you stay tuned to SeahawksDraftBlog.com. It's a busy time of the year. And then obviously they can find you on YouTube at Rob Staton Football? Correct, yes. All the videos on there. Okay, and then follow him on Twitter at Rob Staton. This episode will be up on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button there when you go there to watch it later. Also listening to it on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast, and of course up at pucksports.com.